Hi, everybody. My name is Derek Bermel, and I'm the Artistic Director of the American Composers Orchestra. Welcome, 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 everybody, to our Professional Development Webinar Series, which is co-hosted by the American Composers Forum. I want to thank our donors for making this possible, including the Virginia B. Toolman Foundation, the New York State Council on the Arts, and the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs. Thank you to all of those folks. And thank you so much to the ACO staff who's done terrific work on this webinar series. Please tune in as much as you can. Go to our website and check out more information about this whole series. Thanks to Jensen Artists, to Christina Jensen for helping do PR for us. And thank you so much to Dameun Strange, who's with us from the American Composers Forum and who will be moderating today. So take it away, Dameun.
Thanks, Derek. Thank you so much to the American Composers Orchestra and obviously ACF. I am Dameun Strange. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am the Director of Community and Belonging at the American Composers Forum, and I'm also a composer um, from the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul in Minnesota. Um, I am currently a Jerome Hill Fellow, and I've been doing this work in music and all of that for a long time, and I'm excited to be able to talk to our very special and amazing guest today about finding your voice online. And I go all the way back to Friendster, in that online community, and so we'll be talking about that journey of online life, and hopefully you'll pick up some tips from our artist here, as well as Beth, who is a PR professional. Um, but we're excited for this conversation about online life. So I'm just going to start by introducing our guests, our panelists today. I'm going to start with Mary Prescott, um, who is a Thai American interdisciplinary artist, composer, and pianist who explores the foundations and facets of identity and social conditions through experimental performance. She aims to foster understanding and create pathways for change by voicing emotional and human truth through artistic investigation and dissemination. Mary is an awardee of the National Performance Network Creation Fund, supported by the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and the National Endowment for the Arts. An American Composers Forum Create Commission, supported by the Jerome Foundation, a New Music USA project grant, and several state and regional awards. She has been commissioned by Roulette Intermedium in New York, Living Arts in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Public Functionary in Minneapolis here, Duo Harmonia, Shepherdess Duo, and the Piano Teachers Congress of New York. Mary is a current fellow of the American Opera Project Composer and Voice Program and an artist in residence at Lanesboro Arts here in Minnesota. She has previously held residencies at Roulette Intermedium, Hudson Hall, Elite Venue and Gallery, Avaloq Farm Music Institute, and Arts, Letters, and Numbers. Welcome, Mary. Next, we have Anthony R. Green. Um, Anthony R. Green is a composer, performer, and social justice artist whose various creative and pedagogical, pedagogical projects have been presented in 25 countries in venues such as Jordan Hall, Boston, Tivoli, Vredenburg, and Utrecht, Netherlands, Spike Gallery, Germany, the Israel Conservatory of Music in Tel Aviv, the Shoe Factory in Nicosia, Cyprus, and Symphony Space Spectrum and Marian Anderson Hall in New York, among others. A former night visiting composer, Green has been invited to numerous residencies in the US and Europe. He is also the co-founder and associate director of the Boston-based Castle of Our Skins, dedicated to celebrating Black artistry through music, 365 days a year. All right. Welcome, Anthony. And last but not least is as a founder of Verismo Communications, Beth Stewart amplifies the authentic voices of women, queer folks, and people of color in classical music. Respected for her creativity and candor, Beth draws on her breadth of experience in the industry as publicist, producer, and performer, which has fueled her deep empathy for those working on stage and behind the scenes. Her determination to inspire those around her has shaped Verismo as a classical music PR firm that creates space and opportunities for clients' lives and operates in unswerving integrity. Beth's work has propelled clients to glossy magazine covers, successful appearances on international networks including CNN, BBC World, SBS, and ABC, and features in top print publications including the New York Times, Washington Post, The Times, Billboard, Opera News, and Gramophone. She has played an integral role in major promotional and awards campaigns with clients such as mezzo-soprano Jamie Barton, conductor Eunsoon Kim, and Lydia Yakutskaya. And Against the Grain, earning recognition from International Opera Awards, Latin Grammy Awards, Juno Awards, and BBC Music Magazine Awards. Best trademark drive and infectious energy has been instrumental in the launch of Turn the Spotlight, an organization founded to identify, nurture, and empower leaders, and in turn to illuminate the path to more equitable future in the arts. Thank you, Beth, for joining us today. Yeah, so great panel. We're looking forward to a great conversation. If you want to ask any questions, feel free to go ahead and throw that in the chat, and we'll make sure that we save time for a little Q&A at the end. But first, I'd like to start at the beginning with our panelists here, and in the beginning of your artistic uh, and journey online, what is your online journey been like? As I mentioned, I started way back when when Friendster was around, and then then there was MySpace and all of that, which MySpace became kind of a an interesting space for creatives to really kind of share who they were, maybe give them a little too much latitude on that platform at times. Um, but that's kind of like where my journey began. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your journey online and what's important to you. Anyone can jump in.
Well, I guess I'll talk a little bit about my journey online. Um, Similar to Damien, I started my social media exploration as one of the first, I guess, thousands or maybe 5,000 people on Facebook. I remember those days when Facebook was just open to people with a .edu email address. And I'm not sure if opening it up to everybody was a good thing or a bad thing. Probably a bad thing, but then we get into questions of access and all of that. Um, uh, but to move on from there, I was one of those people who was this vehemently against Twitter and started to use Twitter because of Castle of Our Skins. Ash and I wanted Castle of Our Skins to have a presence on all of the major social media platforms, and that definitely makes sense for a young organization. So as I started using Twitter with Castle of Our Skins, I realized that I wanted to say much more than I could say using Castle of Our Skins as an identity, because some of the things that I wanted to say are really controversial. And when you're starting a young organization, there are some stipulations in grant making that basically say you can't take a political position, right? So I didn't want to be the one to open my big mouth and get Castle of Our Skins in trouble. And that's basically why I decided to get my own personal Twitter and realized that I loved it so, so much. So then I became one of those people that was kind of anti Instagram. But then I realized that I was being super political on Twitter and super political on Facebook, and I didn't have a non-political social media platform. So I hopped on Instagram and fell in love with the family photos, the photos of food, the photos of cats and dogs and other cute animals and fungi. But of course, now I'm super political on Instagram too. So I can't get away with not being political. But um, I also have this thing when I'm super, super busy with projects and commissions that I focus on Instagram and I sort of leave Facebook and Twitter, not because I want to, although I'm not a big fan of Facebook anymore, but I actually really love Twitter. But when I'm super, super busy, I just go quiet on Twitter and I kind of focus on one platform. So yeah, if some of y'all out there haven't seen me on Twitter, it's because I got things to do, unfortunately. So
Yeah, my experience shares some touch points in common with Anthony's. I also started out posting mostly as Verismo Communications. So we're at VerismoCom on all the platforms. And I think when I started my company 8 years ago, I was really concerned with being very, very professional to the point of being devoid of personality, right? Like I was so buttoned up. It was so important to me to build that credibility that I sort of stripped away who I am. And I think the journey over the past 8 years has been infusing more of me back into my online persona. I think that even as I was always advising my PR clients to really embrace who they are or embrace a portion of who they want to be in the public eye, I was nervous to share my own stuff. I remember every year on National Coming Out Day, I would get super nervous and try to decide if I should say anything about me being queer, if I should just support my queer clients. I think now I'm much more likely to speak in my own voice. And part of that is because I think social media is most effective when it's a conversation. And I think if you're speaking in this sort of like buttoned up third person, just blasting your own stuff, it's really hard for that to be a conversation or a community. I think the other thing that I've really decided over the past few years is that it's kind of crucial to use each platform for what it's best suited for. I speak to young artists and students a lot, and they're always asking, do I need to be on every single platform? And I always say you should reserve your handle on every platform just so it doesn't get snatched up by somebody else. But you should only use the platforms that you're going to use regularly. Use the ones that resonate with you. Like Facebook at this point is basically just your uncles arguing about politics in the next room. Twitter is great for hot takes or politics or honestly accessing the higher ups at companies that might not respond to your email. Instagram for me is like my safe space where I just want to look at like brilliant photos and like reshare interesting things to my stories. Yeah, I think that if you can focus on what each platform is best suited for and how that relates to your own goals online and building your own community, that can be effective.
Thanks, Beth. How about you, Mary?
So I guess I'll go now. I think a little different than the two of you. I got on social media at first just for my personal use. It had nothing to do with my arts practice. It was just to say hey to my friends and things like that back in the day. And I also started on Friendster and MySpace, and then graduated to Facebook when that became available. And I think now, as I've been developing my career as a creator more, because like being a creator is kind of my new life. My past life was more as a classical pianist that switched over. So now as a creator, I think I've probably been using my social media platforms less now for personal uses and more for professional promotion. And to that end, I really, I would say that I rarely use it for sharing about my personal life. And part of that has to do with differentiating between being a performer as a profession and being a performer at home, which I don't really want to do. So I kind of avoid that with my social media at this point. I will also say, though, that I think that's authentic to me, is that I don't want my home life to be a performance. So, you know, that's, I guess, how I share my authenticity in that sense.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, Beth, you were mentioned how you encourage your clients to embrace who they are, and Mary, you talked about authenticity too, which I think is really important. And some of you have mentioned some of the best practices that you like to have, but I wonder, like, what is the deeper? Do you have a deeper strategy in what you're looking at sharing and how you promote your work online? Is there a particular strategy around what you're doing?
Yeah, for me, um, because I haven't had the most amount of time to create my posts myself and tag everybody and do due diligence, one of my best strategies is to share the posts that have been created that promote my projects and make sure I'm blasting as much as possible, but also in a healthy way. So I don't want to become addicted to social media. But I also recognize that there is this part of me, especially as a social justice artist, that wants to put forth important messages. So I share those messages as well. And then there's a part of me that really loves balance. So that's when I share the cat stuff.
Particularly appreciated your your stories that you share on Instagram, and especially during your travels. It's a good. It's interesting to me. I will say, even as a black man who has not traveled a lot outside of the country, and an artist, to see your life and the work that you're doing as a composer in other countries, it's really inspiring. So I like that part. I don't know if there's any strategy behind that for you to be seen out there and traveling, but it's something that I've
Yeah.
appreciated.
I would definitely say that growing up, I also didn't come across many Black people who traveled outside of the United States extensively, outside of my aunt, who is such a well-traveled person slash photographer slash scholar. And so when I moved to the Netherlands, it was a really wonderful opportunity for me to just snap pictures and try to get people interested in coming over and promising them that once you're over here, things are actually much cheaper than they are in the United States.
That's great.
I think for me, the strategy is different for each artist or organization that I'm working with. For myself, I would say I tend to use Twitter when I want to start or contribute to a conversation that's already happening. I also use it when I want to dust off my soapbox. I think some of my more popular posts on Twitter have been sort of educational threads. In the summer of 2020, I remember getting really frustrated seeing a lot of really kind of vague, amorphous comments coming from organizations who were praising all those seeking equity and like sharing that Bernstein quote about making music to combat violence. And I was just so fed up with it. So I did a thread of like, here are 5 things that you should be doing right now for your brand. And here are 5 things we could really do without. I think I also did a thread at the beginning of quarantine when there was this like huge surge of like, hustle, get after it posts, like now's the time to like learn that language and level up your career. And I just found that completely antithetical to how I was feeling. Like I was really feeling like this was a time to cocoon and give yourself what you need and like maybe not be so hard and driven. So I did a thread about that. On Instagram, like I said, it's kind of my happy place. But one of the strategies that I've used there kind of has to do with the way that I tend to communicate in offline. So I'm kind of known for writing handwritten notes. It's just something that I do when I meet people or want to meet people or want to say thank you or really any excuse. I have nice stationery and I love to use it. So I started a series on Instagram called Verismo, because I also love portmanteaus, where I just write a handwritten note and then like expound on it a little bit in the comments. I think that your strategy should really be tailored to your brand and also to the platform. So like if you're a very formal conductor, for example, TikTok might not be the place for you. But if you love memification and engaging with other people and side-by-side videos, then TikTok might be a fantastic fit. If you're looking to reach older audience members, because the demographic has aged so much on Facebook, if you're looking to reach people who might want to come to a matinee concert, Facebook might be the right place to share that message. I think you have to tailor your tone and your goals for each one of those.
Yeah. Mary, you talked about a very specific strategy in your journey story. Do you want to expound upon that?
Well, I can actually talk about another strategy that I never really thought of as a strategy, but I guess could be considered one, which was maybe, do I call this a campaign? I don't know. But last year or about 2 years ago, I stopped listening to the news because it was detrimental to my emotional and psychological health. So to replace that, I went to the library and grabbed a bunch of CDs off of the shelf and then just started listening to random music that was just completely random, like really just pulled off the shelf. And every day I did that instead of listening to the news. And then I started doing Instagram stories with what I listened to every day. That turned into a really, really fun way to connect with audiences. And it ended up being all kinds of people that I had never met before. And really just kind of light conversations about music that we love and are experiencing and discovering together. For me, a lot of it was for the first time, and I'm sure for a lot of the people who watched those, it was for the first time. And I think, Dameun, that's how we kind of met.
Yep.
Through some of those stories. So that was a really fun campaign or strategy that I kept up on a very regular basis for a long time. And the only reason I kind of paused that was because of the pandemic and I couldn't go to the library anymore.
Well,
but
yeah,
maybe once you go to the library again.
Yeah, I really love that series. I would always like, I love the ones I love the ones that I knew and I was like, oh yeah, someone else loves that too. And then I loved learning about new artists and new material. So that was really an effective way to engage with other people, I think. And I think everyone has mentioned sort of some shifts because of COVID. How have your lives shifted online in other ways because of COVID as performers and just in general? Beth, were you gonna?
I was going to compliment Mary's project and talk
Oh,
about
so you can do that.
I thought it was awesome. I mean, I think one of the things that I really like about Mary's project that I think transfers over to your new question, Dameun, about kind of how are we adapting in the COVID times. I think one of my best pieces of advice would be to be honest with yourself about where you're at and what's sustainable for you at this point. I think listening to music every day and then posting about it is awesome. And that sounds totally achievable and sustainable to me. Like if somebody had set a goal of 3 new blog posts every week, that might be tougher to maintain. Like I think we've all had weeks or months during this period when we really just wanted to like stay under the covers. And I think it's okay to like honor that part of ourselves. I know for me, I have not felt the creative drive that usually kind of powers me through life on a consistent basis over the past year. And I think allowing myself to be where I'm at each day has worked for me. It means that I do a lot more listening on social media. Like I love, hashtag new music Twitter, for example. Like there are some brilliant conversations that go on there, like also some kind of witty snide commentary. But it's really interesting for me to follow that, to follow the super active musicologists, particularly Black musicologists on Twitter. I love listening to those conversations and learning and amplifying them. I would not be being true to myself if I were concocting a strategy that required me to generate tons of creative content every day right now. Like, I know that's not feasible.
Yeah, COVID has definitely changed the way people interact online. And for some people, that's been a silent blessing. I know that's been true for me because I can't travel anymore because nobody really can. But I've been invited to quite a number of universities to give lectures and workshops. And I guess it would have been physically possible to go to all of those things, but definitely inconvenient and expensive considering hotels and external costs that may or may not have been covered by the university for their stipends. So I've been spending quite a bit of time online just interacting with the younger generation of students because of these invitations and just meeting wonderful young composers, young musicians, and young creative artists. And that has been such a great blessing. And it has also made me interact more with people on social media. But then, of course, as your followership rises, your time to give to things that you usually gave time to before diminishes, right? So there's always this balancing act that one has to do. But what I can do is my best, right? I recognize that people are interacting with me for me, right? So I need to make sure that I am whole enough to present myself to people. And I do that. I'm not going to bend over backwards because if I am not healthy and not in my right mind, then I don't want people to see that. I might post a little bit about it because that's the honesty in me, but I'm also not going to compromise who I am to please other people.
Yeah, it seems that that balance is, both you and Beth bring up that balance, and I think Beth, you touched on that in your opening too. I think that is certainly healthy. I've certainly found taking a break for weeks or so to be something that I needed to do, um, especially during 2020 um, and the election on top of COVID and other social issues that were happening. It can be overwhelming, especially if you're an empath. That is a lot to take in all of the time. Um, Mary, you also did something really interesting with one of your projects online because of COVID. You had to make some adjustments to a piece that you had written, which I found to be really interesting and innovative way of engaging an audience. You were going to talk about your piece that you did a few months ago, I guess. Like
Yeah, it was actually not even that long ago. It was a month and a half ago.
month and a half. Yeah.
It was a lifetime, and it was yesterday at the same time. But thanks for the introduction for that. So the piece was called Tida, and it's an interdisciplinary music-based piece that is about my maternal lineage and my mom's experience as an immigrant coming to the United States and then raising a biracial family in Minneapolis. And when I first conceived of this project, it was supposed to be with 4 performers. It was supposed to be a live experience. You know, I'm seeing that my internet connection is unstable. Can y'all hear me okay?
It's still going pretty well. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. So of course we all had projects that were supposed to be in the physical world, in the live world where we could be together. And then COVID shifted all of that. So I adapted that idea for a live stream. So it became for one person, which was me. And I included a film in that so that I could represent things that I couldn't do all by myself necessarily. And one of the other adaptations that I made, because I felt really sad about not being able to connect with my audience, I wanted to try to achieve that somehow. And so to do that, I decided I'm going to share my mom's recipe for her Thai rice soup, which is something that she always makes after holiday meals with turkey leftovers. And to me, that was a good pairing for that piece because it already showed that adaptation and, the adaptation to American food and Thai food coming together. And it was something that, my audience could make at home together at the same time and then experience the show at the same time as eating the food, so they were going to taste my mom's recipe while watching a show about her commingling with American life, if all of that makes sense. And I thought, that's how people can do something physical and sensory. They can smell the food, they can taste the food, they can participate in the action of the cooking, which to me, cooking and eating is something that is just so special and really can bring people together even across that internet connection. So yeah, that was the project, and that was my idea to create togetherness despite being apart.
Yeah. And I mean, I thought it was a great idea, and the performance itself was beautiful as well. It was well done. Obviously, Roulette had the technology to like really make it an amazing presentation. But the other sense is sort of building a community around that project and inviting people into your community, which is something I know that we talked about in our conversations before, the panelists and I. And so my question is to you and your experience and living your life online, how is community lived or created and lived authentically online? How have you seen that in your experiences?
Yeah, I would just like to jump in and say that there are so many composers and performers and creative artists out there who have dove into the pool of social justice and speaking out and trying to shift their practice and this world towards more equity and representation and justice. And so finding these like-minded artists has been life affirming for me on the one hand, and on the other hand has led to some really wonderful projects and friendships. And it's amazing how many public things that there are, but then also how many smaller projects there are. I was asked, for example, to be part of Armando Ortiz's Música por una Cambia series. And he is based in Mexico and invites all of these Mexican musicians to play music by BIPOC composers. And he performed one of my violin pieces. Somebody else performed one of my solo vibraphone pieces. Just wonderful performances, but also such an engaging conversation. And because everyone is doing performances online now, these Zoom performances have the chat panels where people can interact with you. So I've shared my email addresses with panelists, and people have gotten in touch with me that way. Same, not necessarily emails on the YouTube comments, but also seeing people that you recognize on YouTube concerts has been really wonderful. And it's the new way of bumping into somebody on the street, and it's a great replacement for me, especially when I'm here in the Netherlands attending these performances online that are either in the United States or in other countries that I just can't access right now.
I I love that. I mean, that was one of the things that I thought about early on in COVID as if there were any benefits to this time was being able to open up um, your own personal world to a larger world in those performances. The performances that you probably would have done in person now were available to a much wider audiences. And those conversations and meeting people, the way that you talked about in the chat functions of a festival or something, it was still cool to be able to do that, you know, or a conference, for example. Like you don't get to meet people at the happy hour after the sessions or anything, but you can chat with them in the chat functions and build a relationship there. Beth, what do you think about community online from your point of view?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember when we kind of brainstormed this idea earlier in the week. I think one of the things I mentioned was how glad I was that Instagram had started a feature where you could share other people's posts to your stories. Like, I've really been loving that. Like, it's a really nice, easy way to engage with someone else's content in a way that allows you to point people directly to that piece of content that they created. The old way of kind of using an app to download and then repost and then just kind of hope they make their way there wasn't as helpful for the original creators. I think that building community online is easiest when you're being true to who you are. You know, I think for my business, in the early days, I thought that people just wanted this like perfect robotic publicist. But now I realize that when people come to Verismo, they're coming because they want me and they want to work with me and they want the kind of like real talk and supportive vibe that I give out. And the more that I can be me online, the more that people know what they would be getting, right? Like, I think that the projects that I have that are really deeply meaningful to me often come to me because of who I am and how honest I've been about that online.
Once again, authenticity is really a really great tool to use when you're online. Um, I I keep thinking about the sharing thing, and it's hard for me not. I mean, given that we just came out of 2020 and 2021, to think about the way that Instagram has sort of transformed too. I think Anthony, you mentioned that a little bit as a way of sharing information as well. I know that a lot of things that different movement leaders have shared during, say, the beginning of the summer when there was a lot of unrest, um, building a community in that way, like a security um, with other people, was a was done really thoughtfully through Instagram, like sharing threads and sharing news. Like I'm thinking of um, when there was you know incidents of police brutality, there was a way that folks were sharing the story, the full story of what happened, so people could see that, and that community grew over the course of the summer. I really appreciated that. And I also like the way you talk about Twitter. Now, I admitted in our initial talk that I am not a Twitter person. I'm still where Anthony was way back when, and I took a break from Twitter for 4 years, to be honest, because I just felt it was that place where like real conversation went to die. So I'm really happy. I'm really happy to hear these experiences where you are seeing, you know, these conversations about equity and about history and who's being left out and omitted, um, and building that sort of community of thought online is something that I really value as well.
Yeah, I would say that Twitter is the complete opposite. I think I've had the most intense conversations about equity and representation and changing hashtag new music to something a little bit more um, e- proper and appropriate and necessary right now. I think Twitter is where I've had those heated conversations, and it's easy to have those conversations on Twitter because of the character limitations. So you don't think in a long-winded way, which is pretty fascinating, right? That social media platforms limitations have to change the way you think and type and formulate your material that you want to get across, right? But yeah, to your point about Instagram as well as Twitter sharing videos about what was actually going down, it was incredible for me to see how the events post George Floyd unfolded. I was slated to arrive in Minneapolis the day before George Floyd was murdered. I was going to be a part of 113 Composers Collective's festival in June, and that was canceled. So a part of me was really sad that I wasn't there to be able to participate in the protests and fight and share my voice. But on the other hand, I was really happy that so many of my friends were sharing videos and images and text, not only in Minneapolis, but there were some things shared in Omaha from some of my friends regarding police brutality and unnecessary arrests. And just and in Providence, my friends were participating in the protests in Providence as well. So I was just getting flooded by all of this amazing political energy. And that, for lack of a better term, gave me life.
So yeah, I it, it it was both inspiring and overwhelming at times as well. And then, you know, and that's it. Like how that balance thing comes into play again there too. Like how much are you taking in, and when you need to take a break from that too. Because I felt like you in the beginning. I felt like I wanted to know what was going on, especially since it was right down the street, essentially here. But then I also had to take a step back at some point too, from taking all of that in. I think, you know, in the earlier parts of the conversation, we talked a little bit about sort of balance in another way, like balance in, you know, Anthony, you talked about having two different Twitter accounts because you wanted to share different things that you wouldn't share in your professional account. And we all know that you know, applying for grants, as you mentioned, is this process of where some funders have really different stipulations on who they will fund and things like that. I wonder how you sort of decide that balance of what you share online, like how specifically or when, maybe this is for you specifically, Beth, where how do you decide what to share and what's too much to share? How do you draw that line and find that balance of being authentic and saving some privacy for yourself?
Before I jump in, I just want to ask if Mary wants to take this one. I feel like I've talked a lot more than her and she's super brilliant. So
I'm not sure if I know how to draw the line, except for either say it or don't say it, you know? And I think that's part of why I have kind of distanced myself from posting a lot of stuff. because I value my privacy, and I don't know. I think online community is important, but it is not the same thing as the relationship that I have in the real world with my close loved ones. Um, I think close relationships can be developed from those online relationships, but yeah, I'm not really into putting all of my private thoughts out into the world just willy nilly. I maybe that's not what people want to hear, but it's just.
Well, I think it has to be your comfort level. It has to be what you're comfortable with. You know, so what about smaller groups? Do you find that because a lot of platforms have ways to make smaller groups within them, uh, private groups and things. Do you find yourself building community in those places?
Um, to be honest with you, I don't think I engage with social media enough to
Mm,
really use those smaller platforms.
yeah.
Um, if I have something that I want to share with a smaller group, then I'll just message individuals,
Mm,
or I'll do like a group email, something
yeah.
like that.
Cool.
So I had a situation recently where I was trying to decide how much of myself I wanted to share online. A week before Christmas, my dad just didn't wake up one morning. He died suddenly. He was my best friend, and it just kind of rocked my entire world. Um, and I really struggled with whether I wanted to share that, particularly on my professional accounts. And ultimately, I decided to share that for a couple of reasons. The first is that I was going to be behaving differently online and in real life for a while. And I wanted people who know me to have an understanding of why that might be. Also, I just think my dad was really cool and like his life was really inspirational. Like he unionized the lawnmowers in his town when he was 8 years old. Like he convinced everyone to like get on board with a minimum price. Like he was just a really cool person. And I wanted to share some of his story, particularly how it influenced my own journey as an entrepreneur with people who might be interested in that aspect of my career. And I think that there are lots of people, certainly lots of people that I work with who wouldn't have been comfortable sharing that level of intimacy with people that they don't know personally. Um, Conversely, I keep my personal Facebook pretty buttoned up. My rule for Facebook is not only do I have to know you in real life, but you have to be someone that I would be excited to run into on the street. So like, if you're someone that I definitely know, but I'd be like, oh, I'm not wearing makeup, I don't want to see you. Like, I just don't friend them on Facebook, or I don't accept that friend request. But if there's someone that I would like really think it might be worth risking COVID to hug, like they're definitely on there. And I think everyone just has to like, you have to decide for yourself what feels comfortable and cozy to you. And also that can change and evolve over time. Like you might go through periods in your personal life or in your career when you feel like having more of a protective shell around your daily life or your thoughts. And you might go through periods or you might be responding to things that are happening in society where you really want to share your gut reaction. And I think that that's something you have to consistently be asking yourself. I think that that's an ongoing auto dialogue. Is that a word? We're going to make that a word.
I'll also jump in and say I'm a Gemini, so I have that introverted, extroverted thing.
That's hard. That's hard. I've gone back and forth with both things. I think I talked about in our conversation how I have 3 Instagram accounts, and I was going to be really ambitious about separating things out, and it just wasn't. I just don't have time to do that, and so I started, um, folding things into one account, and I had, um, you know, blocked a number of people. I made my Instagram account private when I had my son because my son is beautiful and I want to share like his joy with the world, but I didn't want to share it with everyone initially. Um, but I feel like my son is so much a part of what inspires me today that I want people to see the love that I have for him. So he is a part of, and I know that's a weird choice, and people have, um, you know, they have to make their own personal decisions about that. But that's why I do share him, because he's my son every day, and I get up and I create for him. So, uh, but that's part of the brand too. Like I do talk about my family a lot, and that's really based on my my personal values. And so I talk about the generation of women that raised me. It's a huge part of my brand, and so you see that on all my social media platforms. Are there specific branding things that you think that you do in your social media that people would probably realize if they follow you?
For me, it's just promoting Blackness. I
Mm,
think most of my stories are related to Black history, Black artistry, Black people doing crazy, funny stuff, entertaining stuff, Black joy, and just affirming that Black people are not a monolith, despite how the media and other public um, forms of presentations has shaped quote unquote Black identity. Black people are above all of that. We are trans that, right? And so it's been really wonderful just being a part of this movement to say Black people can rest, nap ministry, and following and sharing posts from No White Saviors, who are doing incredible work. And even for the composing is racist, and sharing those stories of trauma, but to make it a point to let everybody know that this stuff is still going on, and if it's still going on, then it has definitely had an effect on how Black people have been taught in institutions throughout history, and that has contributed to the low state of representation that exists today. So I am very gung-ho about supporting Black creatives, and I will always do that.
and I appreciate that for sure, for sure. What about you, Mary?
Um, I don't know if I really have a brand. It's not something that I've tried to actively cultivate, but I will say that my work is highly visual,
Mm,
and that is something that I try to showcase when I share work on social media. Share something that is that looks interesting and kind of maybe mysterious and leads to inquiry.
mm, mhm.
I hope that's what it does. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I think it does personally. And Beth.
Uh, I would like to think that people scrolling any of my social media feeds would be able to discern my values pretty
Mm,
quickly. I think in
mhm,
the stuff that I write and the stuff that I share, that should be pretty apparent. I would also like to think that they would notice that I'm a clear communicator, that I try to cut out extraneous words and sort of like froofy writing. When I'm sending emails, particularly to people who don't know me, I challenge myself to keep it to 150 words or less. Even when you feel like you want to provide a ton of context and background and explain all the things, like I find 150 words is enough to communicate the essential bits. And I hope people can tell that I'm fun, that I love what I do, and that it might not be a drag to interact with me professionally.
it doesn't seem like a drag. um, so I'm just wondering if you have one recommendation for artists when they're thinking about building their presence online. If each of you have like one thing that you think people should think about, what would that be?
I would just say do what you can do. Don't try to do too much. If you try to do too much, you're going to do too much and you're going to compromise some aspect of your practice that you should be focusing on. Social media presence is secondary to your practice. It's not primary. So just do what you can, and that's enough.
Yeah, I would piggyback on what he just said, that consistency is key. So be honest with yourself about what kind of consistency you can realistically commit to. And then I think my one piece of advice would be to communicate your values clearly. And the first part of that is to know what those values are. And if you're not sure what those are, like that, start there, right? Like that's a life thing that needs to happen before a social media thing needs to happen.
I ditto that. That's really important.
I think I would say, and this is kind of beyond just social media, but this also includes website and all of that, but to have or to get a couple of pieces of really strong documentation. Or really great photos, a couple of those.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've talked a little bit about TikTok. That was at the very beginning. And I wonder though, Anthony, I wonder if TikTok might be that place where some creator might, that might be their practice online. But that just goes, I mean, the way social media changes and the platforms change, you know, the things are happening fast and being created every day. But I wonder if you all have thought about like what's the future of social media and online life, and you know, are there any things that you wished were available or would help you in your online life that aren't quite ready yet or there yet? Then we're going to get to some questions. I see a few questions in Q&A.
I honestly don't think I would venture a guess as to what the future of social media or life online looks like further than like 2 weeks in the future. I think it's evolving so quickly. I think, you know, you mentioned TikTok, that has exploded so quickly. I'm probably going to embarrass myself here, and you guys are going to put this on YouTube, and I'm going to regret saying this, but I watched
Definitely
Bridgerton.
will.
So I watched Bridgerton on Netflix. It was trashy and delightful, and the costumes were so colorful. And then I was on TikTok, and I saw that somebody's writing a Bridgerton musical. So one of the creators filmed herself singing the female part of the duet. And then lots of lower voices online were singing the male role opposite her. And there were all these duets. Then there were other people on TikTok who were inspired by that duet to create a dance piece. And like it just kept going on and on. Like all of these different creators, even in different genres and different art forms, were being inspired by each other. And I think that that kind of creative evolution, that kind of asynchronous collaboration is really fascinating. And I'm really interested to see where that heads.
Yeah, like Beth, it's really difficult to predict the trends of social media. I think we can use Facebook as a bit of a gauge because that it's not the oldest, but I guess it's the first wildly viral, successful social media platform. And we see now that it's become this place for older people. And I think the younger people are seeing that and just jumping ship, you know, because their mothers and their aunts are on Facebook and they're just, you know, they need a space away from that. So I sort of predict that maybe Twitter and Instagram would follow in that route, because maybe older people will want to engage more with younger people and start to find these other platforms where younger people are and turn those platforms into a bit of Facebook. But there are new social media platforms popping up. TikTok is definitely one of them. I haven't joined this, but I heard of something called Clubhouse. And I think one cool thing about social media is that it's chipping away at the fourth wall between celebrities that we really like and us who we think are just normal people and not deserving of interacting with these awesome people. But it's great that, Michael Twitty follows me on Twitter and Instagram, and I can see his posts and interact with him, and he responds, and I just think, fangirl, fangirl. One time Laverne Cox liked one of my tweets, and I just said, I can't believe this is life right now. And apparently on Clubhouse, there was this conversation with MC Hammer and Erica Badu and The Rock or something like this. It's one of these exclusive things that you need an invitation to get into. But, like in those early days of Gmail, everyone just got an invite, right? So it's kind of easy to find an invite to this Clubhouse thing. I don't think I'm going to do Clubhouse, but I said that about Twitter. I said that about Instagram.
Clubhouse is Apple only right now, I think. So that counts me out. What about you, Mary? I'm an Android guy. What about you, Mary?
So sorry, I didn't quite catch you for a second there. I don't know about the future of social media, but I have been discovering that there are a lot of groups out there that are now devising performances that are specifically meant to take place on Zoom or in some other kind of platforms like this, where where the participants are each in their own space, and then they somehow collaborate in a performance together. Like I think Here Art Center in New York is doing a performance like this, and actually I'm involved in an opera that is going to be happening that is all going to be virtual. So I think things like that are going to continue to pop up, and the technology will improve so that it's more feasible, and we don't have as many issues with latency and things like that. I also love that doing things online gives so much accessibility to people in the entire world. And that to me is the most exciting thing about virtual performance. And we kind of touched on that before. But I think that is a unique thing to this moment. And that, that's probably my favorite thing about all of this. What's happening. The accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, great. Thank you so much for participating in the conversation, and such good nuggets in there. We do have a few questions from people watching. There's one from Gary Edwards. He says, I had a partner and we broadcast a weekly show called Hey Baldy, where I played music and told jokes. And he created illustrations based on requests from real-time interactive chats. And this was a lot of fun and a good way to promote our product. Unfortunately, my partner took a good paying job, and so that was a really roundabout way of asking, has anyone tried Twitch? I don't even know. Anyone tried Twitch? No? Not at all? None of you?
No, I know some performers who have. The Mezzo Annie Rosen in Chicago has done some live streaming work on Twitch. I know there are people out there doing it. Hasn't been my thing.
Yeah, there are definitely some ensembles, some of whom now have call for scores or proposals that say that their premiere performances will be broadcast on Twitch. And it's basically Greek to me,
I would say I'm a lurker on Twitch, and I'm figuring it out. But I do think it might be an interesting way to, do live audiences or engaging. And, once we still kind of figure out latency issues, maybe it is a way to do, or maybe you can do performances that don't have to depend on time, just response. So I could see maybe some way of doing that type of performance there. It's a good way to, like, I think, do teaching. So and and maybe being interactive in that way. I could see it used in that application. Um, let's see. So Gary also asked, is this a long one? Yeah, no. So is there a site for composers where we can post videos, comments in real time and engage in chats with live interactive exchanges? And huh. Well, what do y'all think about that? I mean, I think Twitch could be that place for that.
Well, the
Or
closest thing I've seen is YouTube, to be honest. You know, you
yeah.
can play the video and then you have the chat panel on the side. And it's been really nice putting those emoji claps and hearts and stuff like that and having conversations. But I'm not sure if Gary is referring to interactive chatting that's verbal and audio. But yeah, YouTube, hate to say it, but YouTube.
What
And you can also do this on Facebook Live and Instagram Live. I agree. I find that sort of like emoji interactive chat bit really energizing, and it serves to reinforce that sense that we're in a shared experience that's happening at this moment in time. And I think so much of what we're experiencing online right now is kind of either asynchronous, where someone's got a performance that they've filmed and then we're watching it after the fact, or it's just sort of one-sided, like this webinar format where we're speaking, but we don't get to see people speaking back to us. So I absolutely do see the allure of that kind of interactive chat commentary.
Sakari asked, I've been told that social media posts with images tend to gain the most traction, but I often have trouble coming up with imagery that might seem redundant, like pictures of me composing at my desk. Do you have any particular strategy for imagery that you share online? No.
Yeah, I think so I think one of the things I would suggest is that you get into the habit of experimenting with capturing images as you're working or going about your life. They can be images of you or images from your point of view. I will say in my experience, shots that have faces in them tend to get more interaction because people who are following you as they're scrolling want to recognize that it's you. And if it's just a picture of a waterfall, they might find that beautiful, but they might not identify that as someone that they connect with right away. So I think getting into that habit is important. I think there are occasions when something like Unsplash, which is kind of royalty, very open use of commercial images, something like that can be useful. I wouldn't over rely on it though. I think that if people are following you, they probably want to see legit visuals of your experience. But I do think high quality images are super important, for sure on Instagram, where it's the main draw, but also on other platforms. And when you're talking about images pulling in engagement on platforms like Facebook, when you're sharing a link, so like a link to an event or a review in a newspaper, I would recommend that you post a photo and then share that link as text rather than posting the link and letting Facebook pre-populate the associated image. And the reason for that is that the Facebook algorithm punishes content that will take people off the Facebook site. So you want to have a photo posted natively, which allows the algorithm to feel comforted that you're keeping people on Facebook, and then you can just have that link in the text.
Facebook is jealous. I have, wait, it looks like we're about at time. I wonder if I have time to ask this last question, or is anyone going to stop me? All right. I'm going to go to this one. I'm curious how you all find balance between work of marketing yourself, your music, art, and sorry, and actual work of creating, composing. For instance, what does your daily composing versus marketing schedule look like? I'm not good at balancing, so I'm not going to answer that one. I can tell you that right now.
I know this question isn't totally really directed at me because I'm not an artist creating, but I can give you a quick rule of thumb. If you're looking to do something like grow your followers on Instagram and you're wondering how to do that without it kind of taking over your life, I recommend a method called, I don't know what it's supposed to be called. I call it the 3x3. So that's identifying 3 hashtags that are really pertinent to what interests you or to your brand. And each day finding 3, just click on that hashtag and then look at the top performing posts. Pick 3 of those and comment on them in a meaningful way each day. 3 hashtags, 3 posts each day. That allows you to be part of a conversation around topics that you're already interested in. And it means that other people who are also interested in that topic will start to see your name and your account engaging meaningfully with that idea.
Any others?
I was just gonna throw out there that I also am not very good at balancing this. And I wanted to just show some solidarity for everybody else who is terrible at balancing. But I, also when it is time to promote a show or a performance that's coming up, I spend a significant amount of time on doing marketing stuff. And I just have nose to the grindstone, and it's all marketing and creating. It's about equal weight.
Great. Well, I think that's all the time that we have, and we've come to the end of this webinar. And I just want to once again thank our panelists, Mary Scott, Anthony Green, and Beth Stewart for this conversation and everything that you've shared today. Thank you all for coming. Be sure to fill out the survey if you will, please, if you have time for that. And again, thank you to the American Composers Orchestra and the American Composers Forum for presenting this webinar. And check back for future events. I know that we have a few coming up soon. I don't know if we have the dates of those, if anyone put that in the chat, but February 10th is the next webinar. And there's a link. Awesome. So thank you again, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much for having us.